Well, Princely Umanmielen did an interview recently, and honestly, I found some of his answers pretty surprising. Some things gave me, pause and some cause for concern, and others made me pretty glad to hear. So, we're going to dive right in. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to talk to you about some of the questions, tell you his answers, and then we're going to discuss, okay? So, he was asked by Mark Wheeler of Inside the Gators, which, if that's not a website that you regularly read, you totally should. Mark has been doing this almost longer than anybody else. Mark Wheeler and Bob Redman are, in my opinion, the originals, right? That did in-depth team reporting like this. And he has done a series where he interviews anonymous players or players on their way out. It used to be called Parting Shots. I even did some for him back in the day. But he sat down with Princely and asked him some interesting questions. He asked him, first of all, about Napier's personality and, the difference between him and Mullen from a personality standpoint. So this was his answer. Mullen, it felt like you could play around with, joke with him a little bit easier. I would say it's not that you can't talk to him, but Napier does feel more focused on business. Like I'd try to start a joke with him and I'd see him wearing some shoes and say, "What do you know about those?" And it just doesn't go anywhere with him. One thing with Napier, he'll acknowledge every player every time he sees them. Ask what's up or how their day is. That means something. Sometimes Mullen would walk right by you like he didn't see you. So they both had different personality styles. Both are good guys in different ways. Mullen was a little bit more loose around the players. Napier is more straightforward, but cares. Mullen felt like he had a little bit more of a personality, more human, if that makes sense. So interesting, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily a surprising quote to anybody. I think Billy Napier is pretty serious. We see that in his press conferences. We've seen that in little snippets of things we've seen from inside the locker room or on game day. I think he does take a very business-like approach to this job. But I also think it's, really awesome to see that players feel like Napier cares about them. He acknowledges them. He cares about them as people. That's important, right? That is a piece to this puzzle. Having known Coach Mullen personally, he is a jokester. He's sarcastic. He's funny. He's very outgoing. I can see why he would be labeled as, having a little bit more personality or a little bit more loose or maybe even more human, because that is very much his personality. Now, that loosey-goosiness may have been a part of what the problem was when he was a coach at Florida. So, positives and negatives there for both of them, but I don't think anything completely shocking. But, he was then asked about, basically winning and at the beginning under Coach Mullen and then going to what we have now, which has been 2 seasons in a row where Florida was under 500, didn't perform up to standard. This is what he said. It's been tough. I feel like there are 2 different outlooks from players on the team when it comes to the new guys and the players that were left over from Mullen. Look at Jaden Hill, who played in those New Year's 6 bowl games, and I played in the SEC championship game my freshman year. And you go from that success to going down to back-to-back losing seasons and not even playing in a bowl game. I think that it's harder than it is for the young guys who haven't been a part of this kind of success and then went down. So they still have hope and they still see the bright side. Okay, so, I get where he's coming from here. Essentially, he's tasted success. He's tasted winning. And he doesn't feel like that's something Florida's on the precipice of. And it is easier to convince young guys that have only experienced these 2 losing seasons that you're close, that if you just change a few things, something is going to be different. The outcome is going to be different. It's easier to convince those guys of that, guys that haven't tasted the success. But honestly, this isn't something that is an exciting quote for Gator fans to read, because to me, Princely is saying that he doesn't think Florida is close to getting back to that success that he experienced in his first couple of years at Florida. And, that's not anything that Gator fans want to hear. I think the most interesting part of this for me, though, was the talk about the strength program. If you have watched this channel over the last several months, you have known that I have been calling for a change in the strength and conditioning program since probably halfway through the season. Although at the beginning of the season, I also pointed out where I felt like some of our weaknesses were. And I did think strength and conditioning is one of them. Listen to this quote, and then we're going to talk about it. I feel like there are differences between how you train by what conference you're in. So like whenever we trained in the off season under Savage, we were working out to be as strong as we could be. You're going up against 300 pounders trying to run the ball down your throat. You better be rocked up. The SEC is bully football, if that makes sense. You better be able to get heads up or you are going to get bullied. With them, the new staff, coming from Louisiana Lafayette, I'm not trying to put anybody down. I don't know. I just felt like we were training to be in the Pac-12 instead of the SEC. The last 2 years, it felt like we were focused more on conditioning and running than lifting weights. I was getting so small in the offseason because we weren't lifting enough heavy weights. Not joking. If you looked at our offseason workouts, you would think we were a track team. That isn't going to work in the SEC. As far as the weight room goes, Coach Savage's program was to make us big and strong, and we were going to have endurance too. But I don't feel like that's the emphasis with this strength program. With Coach Savage, the focus was on deadlifts, bench, squats, all the core lifts, and then focus on shoulder and neck on the side so we didn't have many concussions or shoulder injuries. This program was focused more on snatches, power cleans, and stuff like that. And in my opinion, that didn't really revert to helping you dominate the guy in front of you who has been pushing heavyweight all offseason. Doing a snatch is going to help me with explosiveness, but it isn't doing me a lot of good against a 350-pound lineman putting his hands on me in the run game. Guys, this to me is the most damning quote of the entire interview. And I'll tell you why. When you make your hires for your program, you come into Florida, you come into Alabama, you come into LSU, you are the new head coach, and you are tasked with making all of these important hires. The most important hire that you will make as a head coach is your strength and conditioning coach. This is essentially the head coach of your program for 7 months out of the year. There are windows of time where that is the only person associated with the program that this team sees, right? Strength, conditioning, explosiveness, mean streaks, aggressiveness, the will to continue to fight, relentless effort, all of those things are built in the off season by your strength and conditioning program. That's it. You cannot halfway through the season teach guys to push themselves harder, to be stronger, to get more aggressive. That is something that they train all off season for. By the time you get to the regular season, that team either has that or they don't. This program didn't have that. This was the most important hire that Billy Napier made so far. And it sounds like the first time around, he didn't get it right. And that is scary because your entire program's success is going to be built on the kind of strength and conditioning program that you have. And, Princely chose his words carefully and purposefully said he wasn't trying to insult anyone, but he's right. When you watched Florida this offseason, they got pushed around. Now, if you watch this channel regularly, you'll notice that I have said a lot. We never looked out of shape. Florida never looked winded. They just didn't look strong, which is interesting because that's exactly what Princely is saying here. They trained like a track team. They were in shape 100%. They were not going to be dying in the fourth quarter out there in that Gainesville heat. They were conditioned, but they weren't strong enough. They weren't built to bully the other team. And Florida got bullied a lot this season. So, this was a problem. And I don't know if you remember when Napier was hired, but the players put together an organic effort to keep Coach Savage, which was Mullen's strength and conditioning coach. And I know it is not common for a new staff to retain anybody from the old staff. And retaining a strength coach in particular would have been risky, right? Odds are that guy would have been loyal to Mullen, or at least perceived as loyal to Mullen. And he'd been the captain of the ship with Mullen because that's the role of the strength and conditioning coach. So it could have made the transition much more difficult. So I am not in any way saying that Napier should have listened to the players and retained Savage, but that was a clue right there at how much they loved the guy that was leading him and believed in his program. So then to have a guy come in and completely turn it on its head from the guy that they felt like had helped them get these gains, had helped them get stronger mentally, physically, and do something completely different, maybe wasn't the right move. And this is not a school for on-the-job training. This is not Louisiana Lafayette. There is a massive jump between the talent level at Louisiana Lafayette and in the SEC. And that means the talent level not only on the field, but also on the opposing coaching staffs as well. If there was one hire that probably needed to be from a Power 5 school, it probably was strength and conditioning. Napier didn't do that this first time around. Now, the positive here is that Billy Napier has recognized that this is a problem and has made a change. And that's huge, right? Because all head coaches have egos. Getting them to see the faults in their program and the changes that need to happen is one of the hardest things in college football. And so the fact that Billy Napier has recognized this, has acknowledged it, and has made a change is a really good sign. So now we will see what changes happen this offseason. Do these players get bigger, faster, stronger, tougher? Physically and mentally, because they need to if they're going to win in the SEC. Now, the hard part about this is that generally it takes a full year to see the real impacts of a new strength and conditioning program. So it may be a while before we see the real differences, but there should be some measurable gains this spring and summer. We should see some sort of a difference on the field next season. Florida had to get bigger. They had to get stronger. They had to get tougher. They had to get faster. But most importantly, Florida needed to get mentally tougher. This team as a whole needs a new, more aggressive mindset. That almost always comes from your strength and conditioning program. So Napier's made a change. And now we are going to see what kind of difference that can make. And hopefully it's not too little too late. Hopefully they hit the ground running and we see some major improvements quickly. Now, I think it's so cool that Princely did this interview. And again, said it at the beginning, but massive shout out to Mark Wheeler for pulling this off. This was so insightful, so impactful for me. I think it was a really good look behind the curtain. There was some positives and some negatives. I think the takeaway from this is that there is work to do, and Napier maybe underestimated some of what needed to be done to keep this program, moving in the right direction. But the positive is the players really respond to him. They respect him. They think that he cares about them. They believe in the type of person that he is, and they believe in his work ethic. And all of those things are massive positives. If you want to read more of Princely Umanmielen's comments, you can find the link in the description of this video. But I want to know, what are your thoughts on the points we touched on? Let's talk about it down in the comments. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and go Gators.